Great. Well, thank you for checking out Philman Roll-Up and Associates Public Finance Conversations. I'm here today with Susan Goodwin from Goodwin Consulting. She has a very interesting title. She gets to say special every time she describes her title because she's a special tax consultant. And that is something that will need some explanation as we go through, and she's prepared to do that. So Susan, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And if you wouldn't mind, let's start off with just telling us what a special tax consultant is.
Yeah, it's very special. That's the main thing. So a special tax consultant, talk about a niche. A special tax consultant, it really is a role that's played for formation of the Melrose district. And for any people watching who may not know what a CFD is, maybe now that Tiger King's over, people are just looking for things. A CFD is a community facilities district, which is a Melrose district, and that is a funding mechanism it's a special district that's formed by a city, county, or special other public agency, basically, to fund usually infrastructure, but now more and more also to fund public services. And we work along with the attorneys, with the financial advisors like you, Adam, and with the bond underwriters. And we write the formula that goes in place so that the special taxes that are levied within that community facilities district are collected pursuant to the formula that we write. They're collected each year. If there are bonds sold, it's those revenues that go to repay the bonds. So at the heart of it, it's writing that formula, which is easier than it sounds when you consider that the term of a CFD previously was 30 to 40 years. We're now working on a lot of districts that have a term of, well, perpetuity if we're funding public services, but even for infrastructure, we're working on a lot of districts that have a term of 100 years or so. And no matter what happens within that CFD during that term, we need to make sure that the formula we write adjusts to whatever land uses are there, whatever changes there are over the 100-year period in some cases, and make sure that our formula adjusts to that and always produces the amount of revenue that's needed to repay the bonds or to pay the public service costs.
So we haven't started selling 100-year bonds, but given how flat the yield curve is, maybe that's something that we need to really start looking
Yeah.
for. But Susan, how does one get into special tax consulting? We know you went to USC. Was there a class there that was a special tax consultant 101 that got you prepared for this?
No, there probably still isn't a class there that does anything to do with this. I certainly haven't been asked to speak at it. I'll put it that way. But no, my major was finance, and my emphasis was real estate finance. That was sort of buy low, sell high. They might now cover things like municipal finance, but it really is a niche. It's a different specialty. The USC at least also had a real estate development emphasis, and that's probably where this would have been covered. It wouldn't have been real estate finance. And now I'm guessing they may touch on funding mechanisms, because it's a key part of most master plan communities that are built in California and in other states that have kind of mimicked California as well. So I'm guessing they probably touch on it. They do a lot of pro forma work in those development classes, and this is a key element in the pro forma for a lot of developers now. So, but it is a niche.
So when you went in for an interview on special tax consultant, did you walk in there and say, I know what this job's about and I'm ready to take it on?
Did I lie, you mean? No, I did not. No, the title wasn't special tax consultant. We do a lot more than just what I'm describing here. We do all of the fiscal and financial and economic analysis that goes into real estate entitlement, planning, financing, and then the ongoing after it's put in place. We really are the player on the financing team who sticks around and continues with this through, we hope, through the life of the CFD. So there's a lot more to it than that. But when I first interviewed for my first job in the industry, it was more under the title of real estate finance and economics. So it sounded like a match to me. I definitely had no idea what I was getting myself into, but it was great because it is such a niche that I was young, and there aren't many people that were experts in the field at the time. Mello-Roos was not that old. Mello-Roos came into being in 1982, and I came into the industry in 1988. So it was a good opportunity to get into something new and exciting.
So in 1988, you're posting your website on monster.com, and what pops up, or how did you find out about this job?
Okay, so you really are going to date me here. I don't think there was an internet when I was looking for it. I found the job in a newspaper ad. So that right there defines me as old. And no, I answered a newspaper ad. I went on a Saturday. I remember that, for the interview. And the rest is history, 32 years ago.
Well, times certainly have changed, because I certainly have some friends who tell me they can't get their kids to do internet searches for jobs. At one point or another, you had to wait for that paper to show up and search in some back section to get that.
Right.
So times have changed.
Times have changed. Yes. Yeah. No, and it continues to change as an employer now. We're constantly, every time we hire, it's okay, what's the newest and greatest? Where are the young ones looking? So
when you think about 88, I think of that as an interesting time for land secured financing, which is where we interact the most. I know you do a lot of other things. But you have a real estate market that's not going to do so great during the 90s, or at least the first half of the 90s. And you have a relatively new financing mechanism.
mm-hmm.
Right? When we look back at rate and method of apportionment, or that special tax from the late 80s, we didn't have a lot of times like a termination date on the special tax. We oftentimes didn't actually get enough authorization to issue all the bonds that will support. Is there any insights you have from that period of the real estate market and how it interplayed with what you were doing?
I would say one of the biggest lessons we learned from that time, the things you mentioned they've changed because they needed to, but disclosure to the homeowners was probably the biggest thing that changed in the 90s and definitely needed to change. There was no requirement for any certain dictated disclosure prior to the mid 90s for Mello-Roos. And that did cause some problems with districts early on. There were developers who did not tell the homeowners about the taxes. And you can imagine their unpleasant surprise. And so there were legitimate complaints that sort of blossomed. There was also confusion because Mello-Roos was compared at one point to financing districts in Colorado that were actually very different in their structure. And though there were some of those in Colorado that went bust. And so there was a Wall Street Journal article that compared the two. But that was the thing about Mello-Roos that has, I think has worked very well is there are a lot of intelligent people in the industry who have been part of the Mello-Roos cleanup bills over the years. And that was an example. The disclosure was included in a cleanup bill. And in the mid 90s, it became required down to the font size and the actual wording in the disclosure. And it actually ended up to be better disclosure than what was in place as a mandate for traditional assessment districts that have been around since the early 1900s. So that was one of the biggest changes.
And that's big. I mean, even now when we're doing a mitigation agreement, we will oftentimes require something even in addition to you must disclose, you must provide us a copy of that disclosure. And some agencies actually keep that on file. So if a homeowner comes in and says, we weren't aware of this, they can actually pull that out and say, we actually acquired this developer to provide it to us.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, oftentimes some of the primary Melrose disclosure is buried in the escrow documents.
There is that.
Anyone who's bought a house knows that it's sort of, you're running out of ink in the pen and you just say, okay, turn and show me the lines to sign on. Well, so I feel for them, and my staff who answers the questions from these homeowners are very sympathetic when they call and they say they weren't told about the tax. We know generally they were, but it's hard because it's for some of them it's not something they understand, and they did sign something, and it was a stack of 2-inch stack of documents that they signed. So I do think that homeowners are becoming more sophisticated with all of this. They're asking about these when they go into sales offices. They should be told without asking, but many homeowners around the state they're looking for things like this, and they're looking at what their total annual obligation is going to be now, not just their mortgage payment.
Well, my neighbors certainly know, and they certainly remind me that that's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
So, but you've mentioned there's several different things, and I've really focused on the special tax consultant. That's really where we're getting ready for the primary issuances, and you and I would interact the most in that environment. But another big piece of what you do is the Melrose or CFD administration. And that area has some pretty strict timelines. You have 58 counties that you might work with within the state of California. All of them have some degree of automation, but none of them are the same.
Right.
What is that process like, and how does your team manage to make sure they get on the roll every
year? Well, as you know, July and August are you don't make many plans, and that it's really crunch time. I mean, it's sort of the like the tax deadlines for CPAs. The special taxes must be submitted generally the first week of August, most of the time for most counties. And so it is getting it all done, and they can start, my team can start somewhat early, but we have to wait until the building permit information is available, the cutoff in the tax formula passes, and then the parcel information is available from the county. So it does come down to crunch time. I mean, that is definitely when on weekends and in evenings, you'll see people around more than ever. But I have a fantastic staff. So how does it get done? I've got to give them credit, because they work hard, and they just do what they need to do to make sure that it happens. We don't have a choice. It has to be on there. So,
and you definitely have a good team but to make sure this audience understands what goes into this is most of these special tax formulas have a deadline of somewhere between March and May for the building permits. So Susan's office has to work with different governmental entities, get those permits. Then sometime in the summer, the governing body must approve the levy. Then that needs to get submitted to the county, which is August, which is exactly what we just described. And all that happens so that once it's accepted and you get all the reject parcels and that sort of thing out of there, the tax bill then gets sent to the property owner so they can pay it no later than December 10th or April 10th, right? So quite a lot of activity has to happen in that short period of time.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to it, and certainly the homeowners aren't thanking us for it, but the bond investors are, because that is the revenue that makes their debt service payments. So
that's right.
That's why we can't be late. We can't miss it.
Well, you started a business in a time when there weren't a lot of women-owned business in finance. Would you mind sharing with us your experience there?
Sure. Yeah, it's funny. I never really stopped and said, I'm a woman and I'm going to start a women-owned business. It just, after I had my first child, I needed to just sort of control my own destiny a little bit more, and it became the right time for me to go off on my own. And so I did. I have two business partners who I've worked with now for about 30 years, and they are fantastic people, and we've all had different things going on in our lives at different times. Certainly, having young children and starting a business, and there was a lot to it, but it wasn't like I dreamed about being an entrepreneur. It was more, it became the right time in my life to control my destiny. That's the best way to put it. And like I said, I never really stopped and thought, okay, I'm going to start a woman-owned business. But and so just really sometimes when you say things like that, or when people point it out, it's more like, oh yeah, that's right. Not I never felt like it was a particular detriment to me that it was woman-owned. We really haven't. We have certainly had more. Almost all of our business is repeat business or word of mouth, and that certainly has more to do, I would like to think, with the quality of our work and the customer service we provide than anything to do with being a woman-owned business. But yeah, it has changed substantially since I started in this industry. It was very heavily male-dominated industry back then, but it's been really exciting when I do stop and look at it, at how many women are in the industry now. Public agencies, in the private sector, there's just a lot more women in meetings and conducting those meetings than there were when I started out.
So a lot's changed in that timeline, and I think you were really helpful to a lot of women and other folks that want to go out and try something to kind of break that mold. So I'd say congratulations there.
Oh, thank you.
Would you mind taking a moment to just talk to us a bit about your family?
Sure. I met my husband at USC, so a few years back. And we have two boys. One is what is he now? A junior at Chico State. So I put the "at" in parentheses at this point, but he is actually up there, but obviously Zooming like everybody else. And then we have our younger son is a sophomore in high school, so he's 15 now.
Is he doing school remotely as well?
He is. Now we did get an email last week that they're evaluating perhaps a hybrid structure in a few weeks, depending on how now that the colors have changed, they're going to see how that goes.
It reminds me of the airports after 9/11 when we had.
Oh yeah, exactly. So he's hoping it does, and I hope for all the kids' sake that they could get back safely in some format.
Or I think all of our kids are certainly looking forward to it. I was coaching my son and one of his friends in some sports, and they were jumping up and down saying, when school starts, I'm going to be the first one back.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I can't believe the words I'm hearing right now.
I know. I said to my son, I don't think I'm ever going to hear you and your friends complain about going to school again. So maybe that's what this is all about, right?
Trying to teach our kids about school.
Here's an attitude adjustment for all of you.
That's right. Well, Susan, pretty early in my career, you took some time with me and you helped counsel me and helped kind of set me on a good path, and want to say thank you for that. Some things I've always noticed about you, or maybe not noticed day one, but noticed over time about you, is that you take your trade very seriously and you're very good at it. But you're also able to take that and then break it down to its key components and explain it to people. And I didn't quite know what brought those two things together. And from preparing for this and having this conversation with you today, is there's an element I recognize is you're very humble. You have these very strong traits, but when you describe things, it's very clear that you have a humble approach to you. And I think all those things fit together to make you very successful at what you did at a time when a lot of women didn't have the opportunities or weren't able to put themselves in a position like you have to be able to be as successful as you are.
Well, thank you, Adam. I appreciate all of that. And if I had any influence early on in your career, then I'll be happy to take credit for that with where you've ended up. It was very exciting to watch the steep curve of your climb, because you've done so much, and it just doesn't seem that long ago when you and I first met. How can I possibly be that old? Well, thank you for that. I'll just say thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't know, I've just enjoyed, I enjoy people, and I enjoy the people in the industry. And you know, it's harder as we get older. As you know, we lose friends either to retirement or other means. And it just makes me realize how much I do care for all the people in the industry. I mean, we spend so much time with each other, and it just, if I had to say what I enjoyed most about my career, it's definitely the people that I've come to know and that I've shared projects with over the years. So I'm glad that you were one of them.
Well, thank you. And I think probably with the COVID-19 shutdown type things, we've probably all realized that even more, that how much we value the connections we have in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even with just conference calls before COVID, it, you know, took away a lot of, which was nice as far as the commuting, I won't lie, but but it does, I like the face-to-face element. And I think it makes for lasting relationships for sure. And this has been, yeah, this is not my preferred structure for sure. I'll be glad to get back and see everybody again.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for your time.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks. And thanks for doing this. It's been fun. I've watched the other ones, and I don't know where you find the time, but you've done a great job. Thanks, Adam.